Yo, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to a special episode of the Renegade Roundtable podcast here. I am Jeffrey Kirby. This week, you can see we are not joined by Jared, but instead, we are joined by Ed Troup, who is the host of the Three Rivers podcast and the sports director of Oneburgh. Ed, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm great, Jeff. Thanks for having me, man. The pleasure to be here with you here this morning, and looking forward to the conversation for sure.
Yeah, and it's funny how me and Ed met. So we met at the Draft Nation draft show at Stage AE. That was such a fun time. That was a little over a month ago now, which time flies.
Pretty incredible how quick that time goes, right?
Exactly. But yeah, that was an incredible turnout, and we were kind of sitting next to each other, and so we were able to have some great conversations during that draft show. I can't wait till the Draft Nation Draft 412 they post their because I know they did it last year where they posted it was like a compilation video of that whole thing, and that's going to be cool to see. But yeah, like I said, he is the host of the Three Rivers podcast and the sports director of Oneburgh. He knows his stuff. And speaking of when we met at the draft, let's start there because we're a little over a month since the draft started. And with us being over a month out, what are your thoughts so far on how the Steelers drafted for a second year under Omar Khan?
I think they hit a home run, Jeff. I really do. Again, 2 years in a row that Omar Khan has come in here, addressing the offensive line, which was a pretty big issue for the black and gold for a while. They lost that aggressiveness that they had for a long time up front. A lot of national media that would cover them on Sunday night or Monday Night Football. You would hear them come on at halftime and actually call the Steelers' offensive line up front soft. That some of these guys they were bringing in just wasn't getting the job done. And that reflected on the offense and their struggles over the years. They had to get tough. They had to get big up front. And they've done that the last 2 years in the draft with Broderick Jones last year and Troy Fautanu this year. Zach Frazier, of course, the center from West Virginia, goes to the second pick. So they got three offensive starters in these last two drafts that, I'm thinking Fautanu and Frazier are going to be day one starters. I don't know if they're going to go down the Broderick Jones path of waiting until, 3-4 games into the season to make that switch. So I think you have three day one starters that are going to come in here and boost that offensive line. And then you look at the other draft picks they had in this draft that, remains to be seen, Jeff. But, Roman Wilson, the wide receiver from Michigan, I think he's going to be a big plus for this wide receiver group. And he's going to have to be because they need some more bodies there at that position other than Pickens. So, and then you look at, some of the other pick, the linebacker, the other Wilson linebacker that they got.
Peyton Wilson.
Yeah, from NC State. I mean, if he stays healthy, he's the steal of the draft. Now, that's a big if. He's had some injury problems and some significant ones over the course of his college career. But, all indications right now is he's ready to go. And if they can keep him healthy, he's going to be a nice addition on defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And another guy that you mentioned too, and the one thing that you mentioned about with the offensive line is they've invested that, especially in the last couple of years. What this has reminded me of was in the mid 2010s with what Dallas did, where they were consistently drafting high rounds, first round, multiple years, investing in that offensive line. Are these the sexy picks? Absolutely not. But they're important picks. And you look when they did it with Tyron Smith, they did it with Zach Martin. I forget who else they did. Maybe Travis Frederick, I want to say. So they've invested multiple first-round picks in the offensive line, and that's what you have to do, especially in this division. This division is so important when it comes to being tough, being physical up front, and that's exactly what they've been doing, especially also with the signing of Isaac Seumalo. So they have really invested in that, and that was something that they really needed to do.
Well, I mean, I think one significant thing, Jeff, and I agree with you, is they've really done a 180 on this offensive line in the last two seasons. Really, Omar Khan and his staff have done a 180 on the entire roster. I think there was a statistic out there not long ago for the Steelers that there's only a handful of guys that are still left on this roster from 3 or 4 years ago. For the most part, it's been a complete overhaul, but it had to be. They're in a rebuilding phase, and I know we don't use that word in Pittsburgh when we're talking about the Steelers, but that's truly what it's been, especially since Ben Roethlisberger your Hall of Fame franchise quarterback for 20 some years retires. You just don't, pick up where you left off. There's very few Brett Favres that leave and Aaron Rodgers comes in the next season or two. That doesn't happen very often. Usually you're in a pretty big rebuilding phase. Look at New England, still struggling to replace Brady. They think they found their answer in this year's draft with Drake May. That remains to be seen. They didn't find it with Mac Jones the last couple of years. So the Steelers are still trying to rebuild, but they had to rebuild in many areas. They had to get young, and that's what they're doing. And I'm excited, what they've done so far with this roster. I think you'll see in the next year or two, I think the offensive line's on the right path. I think it's where it needs to be. Now it's defensive line, right? Cam Heyward's getting up there in years. Who knows what his contract situation will be. I expect them, hopefully, to get him under contract here for an extension to let him play out his remaining years with the black and gold up front. But, either way, he only has another year or two left on that defensive line. They got to get younger. They got Benton in there, who they drafted last year, another good draft pick from a year ago. He's going to be very good. But outside of Benton, they need to get younger and stronger on that defensive side of the line, just like they're doing on the offensive side.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that I was thinking about was, so I went back into my memory from the 2021 season, which is not too awfully long ago, and looked at that offensive line. So in 2021, that offensive line consisted of a rookie Dan Moore, Kevin Dotson, Kendrick Green, Trey Turner, Chuks Okorafor. As of now, the only person that's still even on the team right now is Dan Moore, and he's going to obviously get kicked out of that starting spot. So they have, like you meant, they've done a complete 180 on this offensive line. But switching over real quick to the defensive side, like you mentioned with Cam Heyward, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, and people are saying, when they hear the number, let's say $20 million a year, whatever, blah, 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 people say, oh my God, that's an outrageous amount of money, whatever. But when you look at the position or how many players are getting paid, he would be, I think, around the 16th highest defensive lineman in football. And he's 35. Yes, he didn't have that great of a year last year, but he was dealing with the injury and trying to recover from that. He has, like you said, maybe 2 years left. So you have one. If you wanted to give him a 1 year extension, or even if you gave him a 2 year extension, we'll just say that. And let's say 2 years, $38 million, 2 years, $40 million. In terms of where he'd be ranked, that's still, I think, pretty good value in terms of what you could still get out of it.
Right.
I think that's one thing that people aren't understanding. They just see $20 million and they're like, ew, that's way too much. But you got to look at how much some of these guys are getting paid as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the important thing that Cam Heyward brings to you, Jeff, is the leadership, right, in the locker room more than anything. And it's hard to put a dollar figure on that, but Cam Heyward is the leader of this football team right now. He has been in previous seasons. He will continue to be, as long as his play isn't that subpar where you can't justify giving him that type of salary. If he's healthy, I think you can justify that. If he continues to go down this injury path like he did last year, then I think you can start making the argument that it's not worth it. But I think right now, given his history and what he's done and being the leader of this football team and still being able to play, at that level that they need him to play up front, I think you give him, the money. I don't know, maybe you structure it a little bit differently here in the next year or two. But, this is where football gets interesting, right? You've seen this historically over the years. A franchise player, Ben Roethlisberger was one of the few that didn't go on to play somewhere else, that finished their careers with another team, and it's never really that great, right? Think all the way back to Franco Harris. Neither of us were around to watch him play, but Franco Harris finished his career in Seattle. That was awful, right? That's a crime. He should have finished here. Tom Brady went on to win a Super Bowl in Tampa, so you can make that argument there, right? But so often, Brett Favre jumped around after he left the Packers. But so often a lot of guys leave these teams and they finish out their career somewhere else when they shouldn't have. They should have just re-signed with that team. So I hear your argument about giving Cam the money, but in my opinion, at least right now, I think he's worth it. I think he's worth the extension to bring in here. And again, maybe you structure it a little bit differently. Even after next year, you come back to Cam and say, hey, look, we need to restructure your contract. He's done that before. I'd expect him to do it again.
Yeah, and I would say you could do what kind of like a team option kind of deal where you could do like a maybe 1+1, where all right, if he looks good that following year, okay, then if you want to pick up that team option, that's no problem. But if not, if he doesn't play well, then you decline that option and then you go from there. So I think it's there's a way to get it done, and Omar Khan is a master at this, so it's just going to be a matter of time before we do that. I want to get to the quarterbacks for a minute because the Steelers are in an interesting position. You have Russell Wilson you brought in via free agency. You traded for Justin Fields. Now, right now, the driver's seat, or Russell Wilson's in the driver's seat for quarterback one, but then Justin Fields is, he's right there too. This isn't a Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett kind of deal. This is both guys legitimately have a chance to win the quarterback job, although I think Russell Wilson will end up doing that. My question to you is, if you are the Steelers, if you were Mike Tomlin, who would you want to see the starting quarterback to be for the Steelers week one? And if it is Russell Wilson, how would you try to get Justin Fields on the field, or how would you try to get him involved, or how long do you think Russell Wilson would have before you decide to maybe make a change?
Wow, those are all great questions, right? And again, that's what makes the game of football, particularly our Steelers, interesting to talk about with a quarterback controversy. I was under. I'll start here, Jeff. Last year, even before the Pickett, Mason Rudolph, all that, at the end of last season, my thoughts were for the Steelers to bring Pickett. I never thought they'd get rid of Pickett at that point. You have Pickett, you re-sign Mason Rudolph, you go out and get a veteran, and then you try to draft a quarterback. And you bring those four into training camp in Latrobe in July, and you say, hey, guys, open contest. All four of you duke this out. And whoever's the last man standing, the best quarterback at the end of the preseason will be our starter week one, whether that was Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, that free agent quarterback they brought in, or that draft pick as a rookie. Who knows? They kind of did that. Obviously, Rudolph signed somewhere else. They, of course, trade Kenny Pickett. They go out and get Russ Wilson, which is a huge name. Justin Fields, still a pretty big name, young in his career. They got Cal Allen from Buffalo to be their third quarterback on this roster. So they've kind of gone down that path, but this is Russell Wilson's job to lose. If he has an awful camp, an awful preseason, and Fields looked better, then they go down the Fields route. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Russell Wilson will be your starter on week one. But let's face it, this is a sensitive position. First of all, there's two spots on the Pittsburgh Steelers that are always under the microscope, right? Regardless of who's in those positions, quarterback and offensive coordinator. Those are the two hot subjects. As soon as you have any struggles in either of those departments, fans are calling for both of their jobs. So it's not going to take very long. If Russell Wilson comes out and struggles the first couple weeks of the season, you'll be hearing the Justin Fields chants, just like you heard the fire Matt Canada chants last season. So I would expect that he'll have a leash, but that leash may not be that long. It may be a little shorter than normal. So if Russell Wilson struggles early in the season, I would look for them to go to Justin Fields pretty early in this process. That's why they brought Fields in, right? He's the emergency case for Russell Wilson. Wilson may get hurt too. I mean, he's up there in his career. He's a mobile quarterback. If he goes down for injury, you have Justin Fields to bring in. But ideally, Jeff, I think you want good, solid production out of Russell Wilson as your starting quarterback from week one all the way until hopefully the playoffs for the Steelers, and Justin Fields is your backup. Maybe you get Fields on the field in some different packages, on short down situations. We'll have to see how that plays out. I think football, the Cordell Stewart days of he's the one that invented that slash. He came in back in the day as that wide receiver quarterback option with the Steelers. Heck, he even punted the football a couple times. I don't know if those packages still exist in today's NFL. You don't see that much anymore, but I think maybe you bring Fields in a special package and maybe you see what he can do in that role for the Steelers. But I think it's Russell Wilson. Maybe Fields gets on the field a little bit in one of those package situations, but this is Russell Wilson's job to lose going into the season. I think you only see Fields if Russell Wilson struggles after a couple of weeks of the season or he gets hurt.
Yeah. The one thing that I keep thinking about is I wonder if they could do some sort of like a dummy down version of what New Orleans does with Taysom Hill. You could do something like that and find a way to get him on the – but now, obviously, turn my hat around. I am an Ohio State fan. And so obviously I got love for Justin Fields, and I want to see him succeed, and I would love to see him succeed here with Pittsburgh. And my thought on Justin Fields is, yes, do I want to see Russell Wilson succeed? Yes, because him succeeding means that we have a better shot of making the playoffs and getting, and working towards a Super Bowl, which is something that we've been looking for 15 something years. But part of me really wants to see what Justin Fields can do in this system under Arthur Smith, and see what he can do, because we're still in a case where, okay, Russell Wilson's 35 years old. Say he is our guy. He's not going to be our guy for all that long. Where Justin Fields, if you can find out he's your guy and he could be good here in Pittsburgh, you have him for 10, 12 years, as long as you can keep him healthy. So I have an intrigue of, I really want to see what Justin Fields can do in this offense where he is the quarterback, where he is the guy, and see how he can handle it.
Yeah, I think all options are on the table right now at this position for the Steelers. And we learned last year with caution that you can't really take the 3 preseason games for what they are. Kenny Pickett and that offense not only looked good, they looked outstanding during the preseason. They had everybody thinking this is the next Big Ben. This offense with Matt Canada, they finally got it right. They were going to come out in the regular season and be one of the top offenses in the leagues. I think Kenny Pickett went something ridiculous, like five offensive series in the preseason last year, and I think they scored touchdowns on 4 of the 5. Right down the field, boom, 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 and scored on each of those 4 of the 5 drives last year. So you can't, even if Russell Wilson comes out and catches fire in the preseason, even if Justin Fields comes in and starts throwing 80-yard bombs to Pickens downfield, and we all get excited, and we will, because that's what we do as fans. People will, oh, this has to be. No, you got to wait till the regular season starts. Look what happened last year. The 49ers come in here, and they shut down Kenny Pickett in that offense. They couldn't do anything that whole day, and it slowly unraveled as the season went on for the Steelers on offense last year. They had some sparks here or there, but for the most part, it was a struggle as the year went on. So you got to wait and see how the preseason goes to stay healthy. But ultimately, Jeff, during the regular season, you got to see who's going to play best at that position. I think Russell Wilson's your guy for this year. And I think Justin Fields is your guy going forward. At least that's what I hope. I hope that Justin Fields is your long-term solution at this position. I've been saying for years, even in the last couple seasons of Ben Roethlisberger, when he was getting up there in age, they need a mobile quarterback. They need a guy that can come in that can run with the football. They need to look at the division. Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Joe Burrow can move. You look at Patrick Mahomes, right, in the AFC. The pocket passer, the Tom Brady's, the Ben Roethlisbergers, sit back there, wait 3 or 4 seconds, throw the football, find the receiver, pick the defense apart. Those days are over. There's a couple still out there, but for the most part, you need a mobile quarterback that can run with the football and try to make a play with his legs. Steelers have not had that. They have it a little bit with Russell Wilson. They surely have, at least they hope, with Justin Fields.
When you say, so you think that Russell Wilson's your guy this year and then Justin Fields moves forward, or is your quarterback moving forward? My thought on that is, I'm wondering if that could end up being a somewhat iffy situation, because if Russell Wilson is your guy this year and he's not your guy next year, that means he was more than likely wasn't that great. And then you have the question mark with Justin Fields. Whereas if Russell Wilson's, your guy this year, he balls out, he plays well, he goes back to that Seattle Russell Wilson before he had that hand injury, and that being that guy at quarterback, well, then you would think that, all right, he's going to be your guy for the next, I would say, maybe 4, 5, 6 years?
Right. And it also presents a problem in my scenario that I just presented with Justin Fields, because they did not pick up the option on Fields, which means he can be a free agent after this season. And there can be teams out there at the end of this year that look at him the same way the Steelers just looked at him when they acquired him from Chicago. Here's a guy that we could bring in here to be potentially our starter here in the next season or two. So you're exactly right, Jeff. It's a very interesting situation, right? From a contract standpoint, from a position standpoint. But Russell Wilson is not your long-term solution. He's just up there in age. You're hoping this year, maybe next year, you get out of him what he has left in his career, and he can lead you to the playoffs, a playoff win. That would be nice. Ultimately, maybe a Super Bowl. The way this defense is formed and some of these offensive stars and now this line, Super Bowl for this team, I'm not saying next year, but within the next 2 or 3 years, very possible for this team to get back to that conversation. A conversation we have not had in almost 10 years for this team, talking about a possible Super Bowl. But it starts with the quarterback, man. I mean, as well as I do, you follow the NFL. It starts and ends with the quarterback. I mean, that is the main thing. If you do not have a guy that can make plays and lead an offense at that position, man, look up the Carolina Panthers, look up the Tennessee Titans, right? Look up the Houston Texans until last season, until last year when they got Stroud, your guy there from Ohio State. That was a struggle for the Texans over the years to find an answer there. If you do not have an answer at quarterback, yikes. And look back before the Ben Roethlisberger years. I remember when they drafted Roethlisberger, it was like, everybody was relieved when he finally came in and played those first couple games and, led them to a 15-1 record in his first season. Everybody was like, finally, we got it. The Tommy Maddox, the Cordell Stewarts, the Neil O'Donnells going all the way back to those days.
You're going to trigger some older Steeler fans with that name.
I mean, the gap between Terry Bradshaw and Ben Roethlisberger, Bubby Brister, Mark Malone. I mean, this is when I was still in diapers, Jeff. You weren't even on the radar yet. But I remember the days of some of these quarterbacks now, being at my age and following the Steelers from when I was really little. But, man, the gap between Bradshaw and Roethlisberger was huge. We're hoping it's not that big between Roethlisberger and his next replacement.
Yeah, that would be – and like another team that you didn't mention as well, look at the Denver Broncos post Peyton Manning. And he was a guy – he was only there for, maybe 4 years, I want to say. And they got the most out of him, went to 2 Super Bowls and won 1 at the end of his career. Hey, if you could get that out of Russell Wilson for the Steelers, and you could almost guarantee that, hey, you're going to have him for 4 years, and one of those years you're going to win a Super Bowl, I think we would all take that in a heartbeat, especially with the drought that we've taken or that we have had in terms of not even getting a playoff win.
Well, I think one of the other things out there too, Jeff, for Russell Wilson is this year and next year is big for him. I think he wants to prove to the NFL that he's still got it, that he's still a high-quality quarterback that we saw in Seattle. These last couple of seasons with Denver were a fluke, whether it was the system he was in, the coaching. He was banged up a little bit during that time as well, that he is still one of the best quarterbacks in this game. And I think Russell Wilson wants to go on. I think he has a chip on his shoulder, and he has something he wants to prove to the NFL. And that's all good news for the Steelers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Russell Wilson has a chip on his shoulder that he wants to get his career back to where it once was when he was in Seattle. And that's only good news for the Steelers. And it's a good problem to have this upcoming season. It's something that I think we hope that we see the Russ Wilson that we once knew that was a dominant quarterback.
And he's going to be able to possibly get his revenge on Denver, too. So that'll be...
Yeah, they go to Denver early in the season, right? Is it the second game of the season or the third game, I think?
It's going to be second. It's second week because week 3 is the home opener.
Yeah. They start in Atlanta. That's another a game for Smith there, the new offensive coordinator, going back to where he was the head coach the last couple of years, where a lot of people kind of did a head scratcher when they let him go after last season, that he was starting to turn the ship around a little bit there, but just not quick enough for the Falcon fan base and ownership group there. There's some interesting storylines for this season coming up, and everybody's up in arms about the schedule and how hard it is. Man, you never know in the NFL. Health is a big thing of it. It's hard to sit here, at the end of May and say, oh, they're going to win 11 games, they're going to win 12 games. Who knows at this point? And I'm seeing a lot of negative media out there nationally that they have the Steelers win total at 7 or 8 or 9.
I feel like we've had this for the last 3 or 4 years where they just want to say, oh, this is the year. I live in Cleveland. And so when I listen to, if I'm in the car and I do decide to listen to Cleveland radio and they're talking about, and they talk about the Steelers, on 92.3, Dale Ryder, who's their insider, he always says, listen, we do this every year with them. We say, this is the year. They find a way to win. They find a way to do it. It's just how it is. And like I said, 2021, oh, this is the year they finally go off a cliff. 2022, this is the year they go off a cliff. And we have yet to go off the cliff yet.
Remember last year, the Jets, after they brought Aaron Rodgers in, they were going to win the AFC East, and they were going to contend for a Super Bowl. Rodgers goes down on the second play of the game, out for the season. and their season unraveled. You can make the same thing with Patrick Mahomes. Imagine Kansas City without Patrick Mahomes at the quarterback. He goes down with an injury early in the season. Look at the Steelers with T.J. Watt. When Watt goes down, they don't win. Plain and simple. You can sit here and talk about anybody else on this team. Bottom line, when T.J. Watt does not play for the Steelers on defense, they do not win.
No.
Yeah. And so injuries, Jeff, and that's why it cracks me up more in the offseason when we sit here and say the Steelers are going to finish fourth in the AFC North, behind the Browns, the Bengals, and the Ravens. Really? So you mean to tell me if Lamar Jackson goes down, or Joe Burrow last year goes down for the Bengals and they unraveled, that if Myles Garrett goes down for the Cleveland Browns early in the season, that all those teams are going to be better than a healthy Steelers? And vice versa. TJ Watt goes out for the year. All of a sudden, are the Steelers going to be that good? Injuries are so important in the NFL at key positions. Just look at the history of the league. You cannot sit here and predict what's going to happen. Now, you can say on paper, and that's when I think you need to add the word on paper. On paper, the Browns look like a 10-win team. Or on paper, the Steelers look like a 9-win team. I'll listen to that. But you can't sit here and say, well, they're going to finish fourth, or they're going to finish here. So much can happen during the season.
You know what's ironic is you just talked about that. And my literal next question was about to be, where do you think the Steelers rank in the division?
Jeff, let's have the conversation on paper, right? On paper. What they have done with free agency, with what they've done with this draft the last 2 years, the team that they've built here on, what's today's date? May 30th. I was ready to say the 31st. Tomorrow's the last day of May. Here on May 30th, going into, they're in their second week of OTAs. I think they got one more week of OTAs next week, and then their mini camp, and then boom, a month later, we're in training camp mode already. Where they sit right now, I think they're a playoff team, and I also think they have the potential to win their first playoff game since 2016, if you can believe that. That was the last playoff game this franchise won. That's an 8-year drought. It was clear back during that season in which they went to the AFC title game
against New England, because they beat Kansas City. That was their last playoff win, was against Kansas City.
Yes, I think Chris Boswell made like 4 field goals that game or something. They won a weird game.
It was like 6 field goals, I think. Actually, it was like the offense couldn't score for nothing, but it was Chris Boswell. He had to carry the team on his back.
Yep, that and the defense that day, and that was pre Patrick Mahomes, by the way, too.
Yes, that was during the Alex Smith days.
Alex Smith, there you go. So that tells you right there, Jeff, more than either of us need to know. The last time they won a playoff game, Alex Smith was the quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs. They are in desperate need. Mike Tomlin's in desperate need of a playoff win. I'm not saying he's on the hot seat, but you go another season without a playoff win, man, it just gets harder and harder every year to talk about not wanting to make a change. I love Tomlin. I'm a Tomlin guy. I'm not one of these guys that say, fire Tomlin, do this. But we're an impatient fan base, and you're now 8 seasons since a playoff win. So the goal has to be, and I know every year they say, well, our first goal is to win the division. Our next goal is to win the AFC, and our last goal is to win the Super Bowl. Perfect. Every team, all 32 teams have the exact same goal set as the Steelers. But you need to win a playoff game this year. I don't care if they don't go to the Super Bowl this upcoming season, but you got to make the playoffs and win a playoff game. If you win a playoff game, then I think we all take a deep breath. We'll see where it goes after that. And I think right now, to answer your question, Jeff, after that big rate that I just had, that rant, if you will, I think they're a playoff team, and I think they're a playoff caliber win type of football team right now as we sit here today. Now, how many wins will that equal to? Probably another 10 or 11 win season. I mean, they're going to have to win 10 or 11 teams to make the playoffs. We'll start with that. So if you're sitting here on the spot and asking me, they're a 10 to 11 win team, and hopefully they're a playoff win team.
I mean, like you said, they have to win. Look at what happened in the division last year. Baltimore wins the division. Their quarterback stays healthy, and he plays very well. Then you get Cleveland, who lost their quarterback, and they had to play, 4 or 5 different quarterbacks last year. They won 11 games, and they had Joe Flacco literally come off the couch and play very well for them.
Who they didn't bring back.
Yeah, which, you know what, though? I think I wasn't understand. With the way that the fan base was in Cleveland, the moment Deshaun Watson does anything, the moment he throws a pass 2 inches away, they're going to be clamoring for Flacco, and obviously that wasn't going to happen. Then you get Pittsburgh, where Kenny Pickett. I mean, at that point, you might as well have had an injured quarterback with how he was playing at times, and then he did get hurt, and then you had to go to Mason Rudolph, and then you get Cincinnati, who is fourth in the division. They were last in the division and still went over 500. So that shows how great this division is and how important it is to win. And the more impressive part about that was the fact that the Steelers went 5-1 with Kenny Pickett as your quarterback. Well, Kenny Pickett was your quarterback for 4 of those 6 games. So he went 3-1. And I think that was one of the more impressive things was the fact that the Steelers went 5-1 in this division.
100%, Jeff. And really, they should have went 6-0. The only loss was that game at Cleveland, in which the offense just completely could not move the football. That's a game that they had no business losing. They absolutely should have won that game at Cleveland. And of course, Matt Canada was fired the following week after that. That was the last of the Matt Canada offense that we saw. So yeah, you can make the argument that they should have went 6-0 in the AFC North last year, and against that type of competition. Man, you think to yourself, the hardest division in football, and you go 5-1, should have went 6-0. That's why Mike Tomlin's here, plain and simple. People can sit here and jump up and down and complain about Mike Tomlin and the staff and this and that. He never loses a team, no matter what injuries happen. The game of football at any level. I coached my sons in youth football here in Western Pennsylvania. I'm around the high school game. I broadcast high school football for over 25 years here in Western PA, which if anybody out there watching knows that high school football in Western Pennsylvania is huge. It's Steelers, and then you can make the argument that at least in the Western Pennsylvania part of the state, high school football is probably above Pitt in college football. Now, it's not going to be at Penn State. In fact, some people even out in the central part of the state will probably, well, not probably, they do put Penn State above the NFL and state college in central Pennsylvania, and rightfully so. That's their gig. That's their thing with line football. But at any level of football, Jeff, you can lose a team like that as a coach. Injuries, negative atmosphere, 2 or 3 game losing streak. All of a sudden, it's just mailing in. And you see it all the time. You see it in the NFL all the time. That never happens with a Mike Tomlin football team. And that's why he's still here. That's why the Roonies have kept him. That's why he's here. Regardless, when Ben Roethlisberger got hurt and you had Duck Hodges as your quarterback, he didn't lose that team. They were still in playoff contention with Duck Hodges as their quarterback. TJ Watt goes down. They lose games, but they're competitive games. Ben Roethlisberger, I love Ben, but the last couple years of his career probably shouldn't have been playing quarterback. The arm was shot, wasn't very mobile. He still found ways to win games, which was fantastic. It shows you why he's the Hall of Famer that he is. But Mike Tomlin still never lost those teams. That's why he's here. That's why the Steelers are so competitive. That's why us as a fan base are so hungry and disappointed when they don't win a playoff game, and why we're like, why we need to win this game. It's because of the history of this. There's always statistics out there for the Steelers, and it's who has the winningest NFL team since the year 2000. The Steelers. They've won the most games, or they're number 2, right behind New England or the City. They're always in the top 3 in that conversation, and you can make the argument that they've had all these non-losing seasons, this, that, and this. But they have a formula in place. They have an expectation. Yeah, they may be 9-8, or before the 17-game schedule, they may be 9-7 or whatever over the course of years. But they keep us in it. They keep us interested. Jeff, I would rather them play the way they play. So when I sit down on a Sunday in week 17 or week 18, I still have something to watch, and it's not week 14. And I'm like, the Steelers are playing the Bengals today, but the Steelers have only won 4 games this year.
Exactly. It's like, I think I'd rather go, do whatever outside or whatever.
Right. So, I don't know about you, but I would rather have that. I wanted them to win a Super Bowl, obviously. In my lifetime, I've been blessed now to see them play, 1, 2, 3, 4 Super Bowls, 2-2. Going back to Super Bowl 30 was the first Super Bowl they lost against the Cowboys. That's when I was a kid, and I got to see them play in that Super Bowl. And then, of course, the other 3. So, I don't know, man. We're spoiled. We're a spoiled fan base. Plain and simple, we're spoiled. Oh, yeah. Go talk to the Browns about how many Super Bowls they've watched.
Oh, listen, I do it every day with my friends here in Cleveland that are Browns fans. I have one more question for you because I know you got to get on out of here.
Good, buddy.
The wide receiver position. We are 2 days away from June 1st. June 1st is an important day in the NFL because you could have the post June 1st cuts, and that could be beneficial for some teams. With that being said, what was it, yesterday or early today? The San Francisco 49ers, they signed another wide receiver, Jawan Jennings. That's still leaving the question out there for Brandon Ayuk. If you were the Steelers, if you are Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin, would you try to make that? Would you still try to make that trade for Brandon Ayuk, or even maybe a Deebo Samuel, or a name that got thrown out as a post June 1st guy was DK Metcalf? What would you want to do as the wide receiver position? Stay put, or really try to go after one of those key guys?
I think the Steelers right now, on paper, and we're going to use that on paper term, are one wide receiver away from being a serious contender for the AFC Conference. Not the AFC North, the AFC Conference, and getting to the Kansas City Chiefs level of being able to compete with the big boys for a possible Super Bowl run. I truly think they are one. There's one missing part to this roster right now. It's a number 2 receiver. It's another big name receiver. You got Pickens, who's fantastic, and then you got 3 or 4 other guys. Calvin Austin III. You drafted Roman Wilson. They signed Des Watkins from
Quez Watkins. And they also went and they signed
Robinson.
No, they didn't re-sign Robinson.
I was like, they got rid of him.
Yeah, they got rid of him. There was someone else that they brought in. I'm totally drawing a blank right now.
Van Jefferson,
yes.
So they got a cast of characters, solid guys. But in my mind, they're all 3 and 4 wide receivers. And Roman Wilson may be that guy, but he's going to be a rookie. We'll have to wait and see. But I think those are all 3 and 4 guys, kick returner type guys, which is great. That's what they need. They need those guys. But they're not that big threat. Pickens is going to get double teamed. We know that. So you need another guy to step up. And maybe it is one of these guys that they have the roster. Maybe Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin are looking at that roster right now, and they're going, hey, we're good. One of these other guys will step up as a big number 2 for us, and we're going to be fine. But I think if you have an opportunity to go get Ayuk or Metcalf or one of these bigger guys, Jeff, 100% you go for it. You put all your chips in. The only thing you don't want to do is break the bank, right? Or put yourself in a position where you're giving up draft capital that's going to hurt you with continuing to rebuild this football team, right? You don't want to give up the next couple drafts, high draft picks, and get yourself in a position where you can't continue to build. I don't know if it's that much worth it, but if one of these guys get cut or you can make a possible trade to go after one of these guys coming up, Jeff, I think it's the missing puzzle piece. I really do. I think right now they're an AFC North contender. They're a playoff win contender, we hope. But I think if you can get one of those big names in here to add to that offense here in the upcoming weeks, I think you go from that to being able to compete with the Kansas City Chiefs, the Cincinnati Bengals, other teams in this conference, and possibly compete for an AFC conference title and possibly make it back to the Super Bowl. That's how close I think they are, and that's why I think if they can go out and get a big receiver and bring in here. Now, will they? I don't think they will. I don't think it's the Steelers style, but I didn't think Russell Wilson and Justin Fields was the Pittsburgh Steelers style. If you have asked me at the end of that season that they would bring those 2 guys in and trade Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph, letting him go, that was a possibility, but I would have said you were crazy. I was like, that's not the Steelers' way. One thing that Omar Khan has done here in the last 2 seasons has adapted the new NFL in the new way. Before the last 20 or 30 years, the road to the Steelers' success was we're going to draft. We're going to bring these guys in for 3 or 4 seasons. We're going to get out what we need to, and then they're going to leave as a free agent. And guess what? We're going to reload in all those drafts since we're going to reload. Flip and turn. And guess what? It worked. But today's NFL has changed. That concept does not work, and the Steelers are proof of that. They haven't won a playoff game in 8 years. Why? Because they need to start having the 2 off seasons and the drafts that they've had the last 2 years. Go more of that mentality and try to flip this roster in a more traditional way of trades. Bringing free agents in. You don't have to go out and spend crazy money and bring in 6 or 7 big names, but bring in a big name or 2. Make a trade. Do a swap here or there. Build your roster with the draft, but also be a free agency in trades as well. And I think that's what they're doing. So I don't necessarily expect it, Jeff. I'd be pleasantly surprised if they do it. But I do think if they do it, that's the missing piece right now.
Hey, if you say we're one piece away, and I think that's where, if you say we are a wide receiver away, then it's worth making the move, even if it involves future drafts. If you think that's the case, then I think it's worth it.
My concern for them right now on offense is Pickens is going to get double teamed a lot. So who now steps into that other role? Who now becomes when Deontay Johnson was getting double teamed and Pickens was open and he turned into a superstar. And then people figured out Deontay Johnson ran 6 yards backwards when he caught a football where he just dropped it every 6 balls were thrown to him. And hence why he's not here anymore, right? And then just gave up on blocking. Well, we can go on that whole tirade here for a while. But that's how Pickens became a superstar. And Johnson was getting double teamed. Pickens. So now Pickens is that guy. Pickens is going to get double teamed. So who steps up on that other side?
Here's the thing, though. If you bring in a guy like Ayuk's a guy that he's your number one, but he's a guy that can run routes very well as well. He's going to get double teamed. And then, okay, you have George Pickens. He's more of that deep guy. He's going to be able to go down the sideline and make plays for you. So don't forget about Roman Wilson. I hate Michigan with all my heart, but I know that Roman Wilson is a good wide receiver, and he's someone that you play him in a slot. I think he's someone that he could have in that situation, there's a chance he could have maybe 600, 700, 800 yards in his rookie year. And if you could get that out of him, that's not a bad season at all to start off for Roman Wilson.
That's what I'm talking about right there, Jeff. You bring in one of these big names, all of a sudden it opens up Pickens downfield. You have a good slide. And Calvin Austin the third, I think, is going to be a nice piece to this puzzle. I do. He's not going to be your 1 or 2, but he's going to be a good kick returner, and he could be a good 3 or 4 receiver in this offense.
Outside of the special teams, I wonder if he's a chance for a possible surprise cut in camp. That would be my question.
As much as I talked him up, I mean, again, this is a competitive group. They need guys to step up. If they don't bring in another receiver, I think the possibility is still out there. Again, just the history of this team and all the moves they've made up to this point, and they got to deal with this Cam Heyward situation. They got to get him under contract and get him happy and back into the and back onto the team, which I think they will. I think they'll be done. But I think they're a receiver away. We'll wait and see. Maybe they feel like they have that guy. Maybe they feel Roman Wilson in his rookie year will take attention away from Pickens and he'll be that guy. Or maybe Jefferson still has something left in the tank, or Watkins, who they brought in from the Cowboys. They really like that guy from what I've read. So they got some puzzle pieces out there, but it remains to be seen, man. And again, as we said at the top of your podcast, a lot of this comes back down to how the quarterback plays in this offense. If they don't turn the ball over, they make plays. If Wilson can look like the Wilson of old and not the Wilson we saw in Denver, if he goes down with an injury and Fields comes in and all of a sudden Fields is running around making plays like he did when he was a Buckeye and what he did early on in his Bears career, and he's not turning the ball over 16 times in 3 weeks, maybe you have something.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know you got to get on out of here, and I do want to say thank you again so much for coming on. And like I said, make sure to go and check out the Three Rivers podcast on Oneburgh. He's also the sports director of Oneburgh. He does a lot of stuff. And again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jeff. Anytime. And as you can see, I'm very passionate about football and about the Steelers, so I'm happy to come on here anytime and talk Steelers with you. On my podcast, we talk some Pirates and Penguins and Pitt and Penn State, some other stuff too. But nothing drives us like the Steelers in football. And this is, a little bit of a downtime the next month or so. We have mini camp coming up here in a couple of weeks. But, man, when we get into Latrobe in mid to late July and the new season's officially underway, that's when it gets fun around here.
Sign Paul Skeens now. That's all I'll say.
Well, the Pirates are making an interesting conversation. We talked Major League Baseball and Pirates this week. In fact, we took a break from the Steelers for the first time on our podcast this year. We actually went all baseball and all Pirates, and a lot of that has to do with Paul Skeens and the Jared Jones and Mitch Keller. I was ready to say the resurrection of Mitch Keller, the return of Mitch Keller. He started out the season just bad in those first couple of games, but he's on a tear now. They have 3 really good starters, and you throw Bailey Faulkner in there as a possible 4th guy. All of a sudden, the Pirates are an interesting subject to talk about. They just need to get another bat or 2 in there before the trade deadline and they could be talking playoffs by the end of the season. We'll wait and see. Don't rush yet.
But until then, again, hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. Again, thank you, Ed, for joining us. Make sure to go and where can they get your podcast, by the way?
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. So if you go on Oneburgh on our Facebook channel, our podcasts are all on there. They're broadcast live every Wednesday on the Oneburgh Facebook channel and also the Oneburgh YouTube channel, and we're also on Spotify. So if you're on Spotify, you just type in Three Rivers Podcast on there. You'll get us on Spotify as well. The audio version, video and audio available on YouTube and Facebook. We're live every Wednesday. In the last couple of weeks, including this upcoming week and this past week, we've actually been doing 2 podcasts. So we've had 2 each week up there. They're about 30 to 40 minutes long each. We had John Parado on from Pittsburgh Baseball Now, who covers the Pirates in Major League Baseball here locally yesterday, as well as Paul Alexander from KDKA Radio and 93.7 The Fan. We had Craig Wolfley on, the Steelers analyst last week. And next week, we're actually going to have Brandon Short, who played linebacker for Penn State and McKeesport locally in Western Pennsylvania. He'll be on our show next week, along with Matt Humbert, who's the head football coach of the back-to-back state high school football champions in Class 3A. And the Belleville Leopards on with us talking high school football, because that's going to start getting underway as well here in the upcoming month.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to give us a like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you guys thought. And until then, have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. Go Steelers. Peace out, everyone.